and this part of the video is going to be about prototypes. Now, prototyping and developing your idea from your drawings. Where do you start? Well, I'll put in a little bit of the backstory here, and I'll try to get down to what give me the energy to just take it on and follow through, let's say. So not every idea you have will be a follow-through idea. Not every idea would be a eureka moment, if you like. So when the eureka moment comes, that's the one where all the blocks fit into place, and you can see everything from drawing to prototype to showing someone to getting the idea and to get a patent, and then to talking about manufacturing. It all happens within a millisecond, and you go, that's a follow-through. So I can follow through on that idea because I'm capable of making that, I'm capable of developing that, and if it's a worthwhile tool, the inspiration behind knowing other people will take that on board and enjoy it is fuel that drives that. For me it is. If I can create something that's practical and that other people are going to delight in using, then and I put my name to it, it feels good, it feels right. So it's a follow through, and I know I can develop it. So this particular eureka moment came when it was after about 3 months of a very bad illness. I was in the middle of a very bad illness, and I'd been off work for a while, and I'd been sitting at home for a lot. And a good few friends of mine had sort of been in contact with me. It was quite a serious illness, and so I'd been to the doctor, and the doctor had said to me, he says, you've possibly got about 7 months left. It's a true story, this now. And I came home from my doctor, and I said to myself, 7 months? And it's not going to be an easy 7 months, because I was already suffering quite a bit at the time. He says, you've possibly got cancer in the gut. And he said, if it wasn't that, it was Crohn's or Crotus. So you were going to be ill incurably. So, yeah, I'm sitting at home. Obviously, things ain't, it's a pretty dark place to be. I have 1 or 2 friends around me, fair enough. But there's no family there, there's no support there, and you've still got to pay your rent, and still got to pay for your room and deal with your housemates, etc. So I had a very difficult time, and I was sitting down in the kitchen, and I was just having a moment. And I was having one of those moments where you sort of talk to yourself, you could say you're talking to God, you're reflecting and saying, is that it after everything I've done? That can't be it, it's not. And I knew I was pretty sick. I didn't know what it was at the time. We were doing biopsies in the hospital and doing tests, so results were still coming back, but they were taking time to come back. And meanwhile, I wasn't working, so there was all sorts of mitigating situations adding stress to how I was feeling. And one particular friend of mine, he said, he rang me up one day and he said to me, he says, listen, you're sitting at home for quite a while now. He says, you haven't been out on the lake much lately. He says, we're going up the lake tomorrow. And he says, when I say we, he says, that's me and you. He says, I'm picking you up at 6 in the morning. And I thought to myself, can I go? I'm not well enough, really. And he could hear it in my voice, my skepticism, if you like. And he said, look, I'm picking you up at 6 o'clock in the morning, you're being ready and you're coming with me. He says, I don't care if you have to get sick over the side of the boat. I don't care, I'm picking you up in the morning, you're getting out of the house, he says. And so the kind of determination in his voice, it set me into motion of going, okay, fair enough, I'm getting out of the house. I have to get out of the house, he's right. I need the fresh air, and I've got very little strength in me, and it'll be a nice day. And so Shane's got a good boat. That was good. So I said, okay, see you in the morning. And within 30 seconds of putting the phone down, one thing Shane has was a huge timber box for his mayfly. And every time we open the lid, half the flies flutter out and disappear again, and we end up catching more, and we spend half the time on the islands or on the shoreline collecting fly when we could be fishing. And I just looked around the room, and you'll notice it when I show you the prototype in a moment. What gave me the idea, and bang, within a few seconds, I'd actually told the couple of people in the kitchen that were sitting with me talking, I said, 1 second, don't say a word to me. I had to get a pen and paper and put a drawing down. And I literally drew three circles and a little sketch of what I thought about. And that was grand, and I put it aside. And I thought, right, now I've drawn it down. It was a good idea. And we almost carried on talking with the lads, and I couldn't get my head away from the idea. And I think I mentioned to the lads, I think I just had a really good idea, that kind of moment. And so my mood changed as well, which was really important. That moment where I was talking to myself, where I was having that conversation about that can't be it moment, and it's a pretty difficult place to be, and to find some sort of strength to know you're not going any further in life, if you like, and it's not going to be easy therefore to the end. You could say I was trying to speak to God. I was trying to soul search. I was trying to grasp some kind of security in a fairly desperate moment, I suppose. And it almost felt to me that this was a gift. The timing couldn't be better. The timing couldn't have been more acutely important to me. And so I guess that's why I've stuck with it as well. There's a lot of emotional attachment to your invention, to your baby, to your thing. So yeah, I couldn't let the idea go. And I'd had a scant around the room, and I started to put together where in the house were bits and pieces of materials that I could use to build one of these. Could I build one before Shane arrived in the morning? And I thought, that's possible, but that's kind of a lot of work, because I wasn't sure what I was going to develop. I just knew what I wanted, what I'd drawn on my picture. And so, sure enough, I decided, right, and this is let's say the start of your prototyping. My very first Jody prototype. As you can see, no more than a CD case. Though I just instantly said I had my collection of CDs in, but they were no longer important. What's important is the idea. And I ripped out the CDs, and I thought, right, that's kind of like that molded case kind of thing that I was thinking about in my mind. It's almost perfect, and it has this kind of flap in it that I can utilize, and so it kind of that was a perfect little part of it. And then I thought, right, to get a case. Well, the case was made out of the pocket of my fishing tackle bag that I ripped off because I wanted some mesh for ventilation. The inside pocket of my camo jacket, I only had brown thread. I didn't have any black thread at the time, so I had to use brown thread. And I can't quite remember where I stole the elastic from. It was probably inside of a lining of a cuff sleeve or a jacket or something. And then I cut up an umbrella and took as much material out of that as I needed. And then I went upstairs, I got a coat hanger, and I bent the coat hanger. Can I get a coat hanger out of me? Let's see if I haven't stitched, I think I've stitched mine in, yeah, I've stitched actually I've stitched mine. My actual design was to stitch the spring into the material itself. We redeveloped that to make it handier and easier in manufacturing afterwards. And so that's what it was. It was a coat hanger, it was duct tape, it was the mesh of a pocket of an old fishing jacket and an old CD case. And I threaded it together, I put it together, and eventually I says, that'll work, that'll actually do the job, it'll work. Now, it was tighter than what it is now. This is some good few years ago now when I first came up with this. Thankfully a good few years ago, because that was a misdiagnosis from the doctor that sent my life into absolute turmoil. Thank you very much, Mr. Doctor. Back on point. So, there wasn't an opening here, that was closed, and it was nice and tight. And we went on to the late Shane. Sure enough, Shane picked me up 6 o'clock in the morning, and we loaded up the car, and he had his great big box in the back. And I never showed him this until we got to the lake. And when we got to the lake, we were unpacking the tackle, and we were putting it onto the boat. And I says, hey Shane, we don't need to use that timber box today. I got one of these. And I threw it to him, and he was just starting the engine at the back of the boat. And he opened it. He had a look, and popped it out. And out pops the receptacle. And he looked at it for a minute. He says, wow, that's cool. Where'd you get that? And I turned around and I said, I got that in Duffy's. That's our local fishing tackle shop. I said, I got that in Duffy's yesterday. He says, Jesus, that's handy. I says, well, I'll get you one. He says, do get me one, he says. I said, $24.99. Now, I just kind of had played with the idea how much I'd want to charge and what the marketing. That night, I'd been up till 4 in the morning, I think. I don't think I got much sleep that night. I was actually very excited about this when I came up with it. Very, very excited. I still am. So, yeah. So Shane's sitting in the back of the boat, and he's scrutinising it, and he's looking at it, and he's going, looks back at me after a while, and he says, you didn't get that in Duffy's. And I says, no, I didn't. And I kind of went, shh, don't you say a word, Shane. He just looked at me, he said, that's genius, he says. That's brilliant. And I knew in that moment, that was my first test. I could trust Shane. One of very, very few that I would have done that with. But nevertheless, I could trust Shane, and he agreed. He wasn't going to say a word. He was quite excited about seeing it get developed. And I think it was that was over a weekend, and on the Monday I was on my way to Dublin to see F.R. Kelly, the patent lawyers, to see if I could get a patent on it. And I developed my drawings over the weekend and laid out a sketch and a description of what it was for. But the initial test was that day, going out on the boat with Shane. And I'll never forget that day, because from coming up with the idea, I ended up going to entrepreneur event after entrepreneur event and meeting people from all circles of entrepreneur lives. And quite a lot of them were nutrition-based products that were being developed, had been trial tested, or were being marketed, or were being affiliate marketed. And I didn't really know anything about all this affiliate marketing or any of this crap, but I eventually met up with one man who's still got an interest in the Jody product, and he had a sit-down meeting with me to discuss investing in this idea. And I explained to him, with my illness, I used to get about 8-hour migraines, intensive migraines, that were so hard, so strong, you couldn't sit and talk to somebody. There would be absolutely no way. I used to have to go down, lie flat on the floor in a dark room and put an ice pack on the top of my head within about 10 minutes of it getting the tingle. Otherwise, I would be collapsed in sweat, and it would be a much worse situation. So the best way for me to mitigate it was to get into a dark room, put an ice cloth on my head, and wait out the pain. And I used to pass out with the pain. I'd wake up several hours later and the pain would be gone, and I literally just tried to carry on through life. I'm on my own. I don't have the family support or family around me as such. So you don't have a choice, you just keep going. So I was explaining this to my potential investor friend, and he said to me, he says, well, I might have something that could help you. And now the pain was just starting to tingle, and I was in a sort of panic. We'd been talking for nearly 6 hours, I think it was. We'd been talking for about 3 hours in that particular meeting. And it had drawn on and drawn on. He was very interested in the idea, and he was very interested in the artwork I do aside from my invention. And so he considered me to be a very investable person and was going to take this to a much bigger conversation and introduce me to some more potential investors. So as much as happy as I was to be sitting having a really profound, in-depth conversation with somebody who can take this to a new level for me, I had to cut the meeting short because of the illness. And that migraine was coming on very strong, and he said to me, oh, well, just come to the boot of my car for a few minutes. And I don't really have time to go to the boot of the car. I need to get into a dark room, lie down, ice on the back, ice on my forehead, and wait out the pain. Now, he had a product called Cardio for Life. Pro RG9 was the name of the product at the time. And he said to me, come on, we'll get a glass of water in the hotel where we just had our meeting. That was the Strand Hotel, Limerick. And he gave me a glass of this Pro RG9. And when you have 8-hour migraines and you know the pain of that, you'll understand that you don't, if somebody's got a potential cure for that, you try it. I'd try anything. So I scooped back a large glass of this Pro RG9, and he gave me the tub. And my driver at the time was driving me back to Galway. He knew all about my migraine, he knew all about my illness, and was basically a sort of a personal minder for a little while for me. A personal carer and a driver, and getting me to meetings and making sure he was supportive if the migraines came on or the illness came on. And so we were about 20 minutes up the road, and I was curled up on the passenger seat with the migraine coming on, but it hadn't quite taken a hold. And I remember sitting up in the seat and looking across to my friend, and I says, wow, it's actually just gone. Like, the pain has just disappeared. That's quite amazing. I said, because my friend tried a glass of the Pro RG9 as well, and I says, did you get anything from that? And he says, I'm driving very alert. He says, I'm very very conscious of my driving skills. He says. So I says, it's very strange. And I will say from that day to this, I never had a migraine since. And I've many friends will attest to that, because several friends who would have apartments in town with a dark room would actually have an ice pack in their fridge for me, because I'd need somewhere to go to lie down and put a pack on my head. And so from that day to this, and that was October the 10th, in 2011, and I have never had a migraine since. The illness was eventually cured with a prescription of also tablets. What was actually happening was a bacteria I picked up while contracting in my floor laying from some hospital that I would use to do a lot of hospital contract work. And so replacing old floors with new floors, and somewhere along the line I picked up a very rare bacteria, and it ate into my gut, and my gut produced more acid, which produced more bacteria and caused an awful lot of bleeding. So the loss of blood was the exhaustion side of it, and that was the mistaken diagnosis of cancer. It was cured, and the migraines had already been dealt with, so I can largely thank coming up with this idea for meeting the right people who helped me get my life back on track to some degree. During that same incident with the doctor, I did get the swine flu jab, and with the swine flu jab I do suffer narcolepsy and catalepsy. That is not what I would call a good doctor, and I have no rebuttal on that. There's no repercussion in my favour for that, except I deal with narcolepsy and catalepsy for the rest of my life, and my doctor is pretty apathetic as to whether he gave me the swine flu jab at all, and won't take responsibility for his own actions. So it leaves me pretty much out on my Todd. So this has come along and has given me an awful lot of spirit, a lot of strength, self-belief and self-awareness again. Has kept me on the right track. I've been to all manner of nutritional events and all manner of entrepreneur events, and I have met some incredibly amazing, positive people along the way. So it's not always just about having your eureka moment. For me, timing was of the essence, and with the fuel, I suppose there was a certain amount of anger involved because I was very ill at the time, and a certain amount of joy involved because I found something to live for, if you like, and to put my name on. So there you go. That was the story of where the eureka moment came from. The turning some very, very difficult time into something incredibly positive. I believe when I last refused investment, it was for 150,000 euros. It was also in the Strand Hotel in Limerick. I refused it on the basis it was an utter reflection of the valuation of the company, and it didn't give me confidence in the people that I would be working with. So I refused 150,000 investment for the right reasons and for integrity, and that wasn't easy at all. But I've kept belief in my product, and I do believe I'm now at a better place. So at the time, the company, the Jody company, was valued at 1.5 million. I don't have 10 euros in my pocket, and somebody's offering me 150,000. If I hadn't have refused it, this project would be dead in the water right now. If I had taken the 150,000, I would have had that to spend on getting the product made, manufactured, and as far as a warehouse, and that's as far as it would have gone. So I'm incredibly grateful for the foresight to refuse that very large investment. Okay, so thank you for watching so far. Do subscribe. I'm going to get on next, in the next part of the video, to the developing of the actual prototype and how to put it together. Okay, thank you very much.